working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On tonight's headlines. President Marcos has ordered for the immediate rehabilitation of flood control infrastructures and resettlement of flood victims in some areas in northern Mindanao that were devastated by the shearline rain and flooding last month. And President Marcos is also expected to talk about the Maharlika Wealth Fund during his trip to Switzerland next week for the World Economic Forum. Leaders are facing the cost of living crisis is the biggest global risk over the next 2 years. The World Economic Forum warned Wednesday in a survey preceding its annual Davos meetings of global elites. And the most challenging task for a vaccine program is how to predict when new variants will surface and how to decide if your vaccine will be effective against these novel variants. Chula COVID-19 is one of the COVID vaccine candidates developed in Thailand by the Chula Vaccine Research Center based on mRNA technology, and we'll find out more later. First in our news, President Marcos has ordered for the immediate rehabilitation of flood control infrastructures and resettlement of flood victims in some areas in northern Mindanao that were devastated by the shearline rain and flooding last month. The President issued a statement during a situation briefing after visiting areas in Misamis Occidental and Oriental, which suffered intense rains and flooding brought about by the shearline in December. Let's listen in.
Pero ito talaga biglaan biglaan ito, walang masyadong warning na ibigay sa atin dahil mukhang ganyan ngayon ang panahon. Kung minsan, kung titignan mo, maayos naman, sabi hindi naman uulan, biglaan na lang magkakaroon ng malaking ulan. Partially damaged, pag pwede nang balikan, magdadala rin kami ng rebuilding material para naman maayos ninyo yung mga bahay. Yung mga completely destroyed na bahay, ay titignan natin kung pagawa na lang tayo o pwede pang magpagawa ng bago o idadali na namin sa resettlement center kung saan meron bibigay ang National Housing Authority na magbibigyan ng pagkakataon para makatira doon sa ating mga resettlement areas. We will make sure na kayo ay lahat ng pangangailangan ninyo ay nakukuha ninyo. Naiba yung nasa Maynila ka lang at nakikita mo sa television, nagbabasa ka ng report, ibang-iba talaga pag nakarating ka at makita mo ng sarili mo kung ano ba talagang naging problema. Kaya pinilit ko na makarating dito. Hindi ko naman nakalain na 16 years pala ang inantay ninyo para makabisita ang inyong Pangulo. Well, hindi ko kayo pag-aantay ng 16 years, usahan ninyo yun.
The shear line is formed when the cold air of the northeast monsoon converges with the warmth of the easterlies and generates thick clouds, which results in heavy rains. The President ordered the Department of Public Works and Highways to focus on fixing the damaged spillways, dikes, and seawalls in the affected areas upon the recommendation of concerned local government units. For Misamis Occidental, he proposed getting assistance from Japan on how to solve the flooding problem in the province. The Philippines is ranked among the most vulnerable nations to the impacts of climate change. And scientists are warning that some storms are becoming more powerful as the world gets warmer. An enormous cyclone gyrating off California's coast was dumping rain today, threatening further floods and landslides in the already southern state. At least 18 people now are known to have died in the parade of storms that have leashed the western U.S., bringing rainfall levels not seen in 150 years to come, or to some places. Ivan Sanchez has more.
On this 10th day of the new year, Los Angeles County residents remain besieged by a severe weather pattern. After a bomb cyclone hit the entirety of California last Thursday, a second storm pattern arrived in Southern California, bringing heavy rain to the Los Angeles area, with two local cities, Porter Ranch and Woodland Hills, each receiving 6 inches of rain. While California is in great need of precipitation after several years of drought and annual wildfires, the soil condition is so dry that it cannot absorb the heavy rains quickly enough, causing street and freeway flooding, mudslides in local mountainous regions, and infrastructure damage, specifically causing power outages affecting more than 200,000 businesses and residents within the state and at least 14 deaths since yesterday. 80 miles away in Santa Barbara, flooding led to the closing of both sides of the 101 freeway. Potholes, including one big enough that it engulfed 2 cars in Chatsworth last night, also developed from rain-caused erosion. Residents of hillside communities have been told to be on standby for evacuation orders, which usually direct victims to local high schools or community colleges set up as evacuation centers. California Governor Gavin Newsom declared a state of emergency last week prior to the bomb cyclone.
The fact that we're not out of the woods. We expect these storms to continue at least through the 18th of this month. We expect a minimum 3 more of these atmospheric rivers in different shapes and forms, depending on different parts of the state. At least as I stand here at this moment, it's around 34,000 people that are currently under evacuation orders. That number is dynamic and will change. 163,000 people as of a few moments ago still without power in this state, and obviously that will change depending on conditions. The biggest factor as it relates to those conditions is wind. You can see all up and down the state, and we've traveled all up and down the state. The wind being a disproportionate factor in terms of down power lines, impacts obviously on trees. The challenge now is one should not be misled. The acuity of the storms in terms of the number of inches of rain and the intensity doesn't tell the entire story. We're soaked. This place is soaked. And now just more modest amount of precipitation could have as equal or greater impact in terms of the conditions on the ground. And that's why it's incredibly important that everybody is mindful to take seriously the orders or recommendations coming from law enforcement in particular.
President Biden declared a federal state of emergency for California, designating emergency resources to further alleviate the impact of these storms and to prevent further destruction. Residents anxiously await additional rain forecasted for the remainder of the week, as California finds itself in the middle of the strongest jet stream of storms since 2005.
A lot worse than expected. All my windows in the back were completely blown out. All my tables were kind of strewn around. My floors were obviously ruined, and our floors had kind of warped. So I guess the waves came up from under the building and pushed up the floors.
As you can imagine, it's pretty devastating. There was lots of tears that day. I was down here while it was happening. My husband FaceTimed me as it was happening, and I just said, I can't. Just show me afterwards. And all we can do, we were prepared.
Ivan Sanchez, Los Angeles, California, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Thanks, Ivan. The cost of living crisis is the biggest global risk over the next 2 years. The World Economic Forum warned in a survey preceding its annual Davos meetings of global elites. The WEF report described the cost of living crisis as the biggest short-term risk between now and 2025, followed by natural disasters, extreme weather events, and geo-economic confrontation. Let's listen more.
Leaders are facing multiple crises that are happening at the same time, so essentially polycrisis. And what that leads to in terms of the sort of overall optimism or pessimism about the state of the world, when we asked leaders what they're expecting to happen, well over 80% are expecting that we're looking at consistent, ongoing crises that are compounding each other, an increasingly volatile trajectory, although 10 years out, we're looking at that number going down to about 50%. So still a fairly negative outlook. Quite a different picture today with things like re-emerging health crises and food crises and energy crises and the cost of living. And at the same time, some newer risks layered on top of that, that certainly today's generation of leaders has not had to deal with recently. So widely speaking, inflation, widely speaking, a potential recession on the horizon, trade wars at a time where just up until 3 or 4 years ago, we were in a very different picture around trade. So this combination of geopolitical and economic risks, and then layered yet on top of that, climate risks that haven't been so front and center as they are today. We did look at climate mitigation risks in addition to the risk of not acting fast enough on adaptation, and both come out at the very top 10 over the next 10 years.
And I think all of those concerns are closely linked to the compounding risks outlined in this year's report. And one example is food insecurity, which has increased due to major reductions in grain exports, lack of fertilizer, and climate change events as well. No country is immune to social erosion caused by lack of affordability and availability of basic necessities. So we have seen the impact already. And of course, businesses need to keep an eye on these political risk scenarios, as well as the increased geopolitical tension in the world, because it creates complexity in terms of managing risks in supply chains. And the war in Ukraine has impacted access to raw materials and minerals, but it's also led to sanctions and trade restrictions that has had an impact on other goods and services as well. And as a result of this, we now see how companies are turning from a just-in-time approach to a more just-in-case strategy. And that we see that in terms of bringing production closer to home, nearshoring, friendshoring, stockpiling, but also we see a trend of vertical integration, meaning that companies are actually looking to acquire both suppliers and clients in order to take control of the whole chain.
Now, global inflation remains at sky-high levels after energy and food costs rocketed last year, largely owing to the invasion of agricultural powerhouse Ukraine by major oil and gas producer Russia. Supply constraints caused by the COVID pandemic have also contributed to decades-high prices for consumers. Many analysts warn that the global economy will suffer a recession this year as inflation remains elevated. The WEF study called on leaders to act collectively and decisively, balancing short and long-term views. Now, President Marcos is expected to talk about the Maharlika Wealth Fund during his trip to Switzerland next week for the World Economic Forum. In a press briefing, Department of Foreign Affairs Undersecretary for Multilateral and International Economic Affairs, Carlos Soreta, said that President Marcos is the only ASEAN leader to attend. The WEF is happening on the 16th to the 20th of this month, and he said it's an ideal platform to soft launch the planned Wealth Fund. Take a look.
Country in our region is recovering well from past challenges where projections remain high for economic growth in our country and our region. And we have a realization in our region that individual and collective economic potential remains great. And there's a lot of hope and optimism. So it's a good time for our country and representing our country and our region to be in Davos at this time. The president will be the only leader from ASEAN to be in Davos, and he will be only one of 2 leaders from Asia. So he will be in a wonderful position to represent not only our country, but how our own region, ASEAN and the East Asia region, can be the engine of growth for the world economy. The theme for WEF is cooperation in a fragmented world. What we want to present is that the Philippines in ASEAN and in Asia can be important factors in bringing together the fragmented parts of the world. What we present to a fragmented world, because of our great economic potential in our country and our region, is it's a promise of progress and prosperity is what we offer if we are able to achieve peace in other parts of the world. We will also have a number of activities on the sidelines including business meetings, as well as meeting with the Filipino community, not only from Switzerland. I understand that other Filipino community members from other parts of Europe have asked to attend, and of course they will be allowed to attend. And I agree completely with the President. The World Economic Forum is a great venue to do a sort of soft launch for our sovereign wealth fund, given the prominence of the forum itself and global and business leaders who will be there. And they will hear it directly from the President, what the fundamentals that we have, and that lead us to decide that we should have a sovereign wealth fund.
Now, Yusek Soretta said that President Marcos Jr. will participate in a high-level dialogue session with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo, European Commission President von der Leyen, and a few more others who have still to confirm in Davos. The chief executive is also scheduled to meet with business leaders and members of the Filipino community in Switzerland and other European nations. In tonight's Southern News, the United States will deploy a newly mobile marine unit in Japan's southern island of Okinawa in a bid to respond better to rising threats led by China, according to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin during a joint news conference with the Japanese defense and foreign ministers in Washington. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken also said the U.S. and Japan will consider space attacks as triggers for their mutual defense treaty. Take a look.
In an increasingly challenging security environment, we've decided that the 12th Artillery Regiment would remain in Japan and be reorganized into the 12th Marine Littoral Regiment by 2025.
We're working to deepen our cooperation across every realm, land, sea, air, and yes, space, cyber, and outer. The outer space component of this is important to the security and prosperity of our alliance. We agreed, as you've heard, that attacks to, from, or within space present a clear challenge. And we affirmed that, depending on the nature of those attacks, this could lead to the invocation of Article 5 of our Japan-U.S. Security Treaty. That is significant. We'll sign as
Now, his counterpart, Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi, said that the U.S. and Japan have together have a vision of a modernized alliance to acquire the posture to win in the new era of strategic competition. The talks finalized a plan by the U.S. to send the so-called Marine Littoral Regiment, a more agile unit that can boost defense both by sea and air, to Okinawa, the southern Japanese island strategically close to Taiwan. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said the unit would be in place by 2025, as we heard earlier, from a reorganization of an existing artillery regiment. Okinawa, under U.S. control until 1972, is home to more than half of the 50,000 U.S. troops in Japan, whose leaders for decades have spoken of easing the burden on a local population often resentful of the bases. Hayashi said that the Japanese government would keep working to address the concern of residents. And in other news, tech's biggest gathering is wrapping in Las Vegas. CES 2023 did not disappoint. Here's Anna Cui at the scene.
CES, the world's biggest tech trade show, wraps up today here in Las Vegas. Under the theme of Human Security for All, attendees got to see companies showcasing their innovative products, focused on ways to make the world a better place for all. Attendees enjoyed cool gadgets at CES 2023, from the latest developments in AR and VR products to robotics, gaming, electronics, and even in transportation. Consumers got a first-hand look at new and upcoming products in the tech world. But there were more than just the cool and fun gadgets this year. CES recognized companies for their outstanding design and engineering that support sustainability and address climate change. Embran Filtra received a Human Security for All award for creating the first low-carbon solvent water filter made from sustainable plants that can block out harmful bacteria and microplastic.
You know, the water crisis is a burning issue recently, and the climate change make get clean water is more and more difficult. So our filter is the first low carbon filtration membrane technology. So we can help make people can get clean water more easy.
Aspera Hydroponic Smart Grower also supports sustainable living, even for those without a green thumb. But it's more than just an indoor garden.
We actually using the technical aspect behind it and apply it to school. We are the only one who do life science, where students design their own experiment with that, and that's what STEM for. STEM is like exploring, let them try and see what's the outcome. Then back to your question about elderly. So we are actually doing some horticulture therapy program, and it's helping people with dementia.
Of course, attendees couldn't miss the more established brands showcasing their designs and plans to reduce carbon emissions, reduce energy use, and environmental waste, with the focus of making life better for all.
Visually impaired by using Braille on all their appliances, remotes. The TV has a sign language guide that's been expanded where you can make it more personal by using it around the TV, making it smaller, bigger.
Lastly, advancing tech and robotics is also keeping up with the sustainability race, addressing environmental concerns. Waste Shark is just one of such inventions showcased here at CES. It's an emission-free drone that can be easily and quickly deployed to collect plastic waste from waterways, canals, rivers, and ports, reducing threat to marine life and human health. That's it for CES 2023. We'll definitely see you again here next year. Anna Kui, Las Vegas, Nevada, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
The most challenging task for a vaccine program is how to predict when new variants will surface and how to decide if your vaccine will be effective against these novel variants. Chula COVID-19 is one of the COVID vaccine candidates developed in Thailand by the Chula Vaccine Research Center based on mRNA technology. Here's more.
The most challenging of the vaccine program is how you can predict the new virus to come and how you're going to design your vaccine good enough for the future virus. My name is Kiat Raksungtham. I'm a professor of medicine. I'm the director of the COVID-19 vaccine development program of the Chula Vaccine Research Center at the medical school. Chula COVID-19 is one of the COVID-19 vaccine candidate development in Thailand by our Chula Vaccine Research Center. This is based on mRNA technology platform. We contract out two US CMO manufacturer to do a clinical lot for our clinical trial. We have finished phase 1 and phase 2. The result look very impressive. The Thai manufacturer, in this case our partner is Bionet Asia, based in Ayutthaya, also complete the manufacturing of the clinical lot. In short, we have the vaccine tested, but that's in US made, and now we are ready to test the Thai made vaccine for the clinical trial. When we start our development, we start only 1 month behind Pfizer Moderna. At that time, no one knows yet that whether mRNA is going to work. We are a small research center, less funding compared to them. But we learned that this vaccine candidate in mice, in monkey, work very well. It's very strong immune response and safe. In our situation, we already have infrastructure, we have some capability. We should try to make our own vaccine. To prove that this platform in Thailand, it works and safe, now we plan to move on. We plan to start manufacturing second generation. Our own vaccine at the end is not for Thailand, but how we can be part of the major player to fight against any pandemics in the near future. So I think that's our goal. A lot of milestone has been reached. So the vaccine has been proven in human, phase 1 and phase 2, safe and highly immunogenic. And the dose that we select for phase 2 and we finish it has shown that is comparable to approved vaccine like Pfizer. The Thai-made vaccine already finished, and now we are waiting for the green light to do a clinical trial in Thailand. and to confirm that whether that is safe and immunogenic. And then we can go further for larger scale study and get authorization for approval. So we have Omicron plus other variant vaccines, so we'll be bivalent, so two type of variant in there. So Gen 2 probably we might be able to start phase 1 sooner by the end of the year or early next year, and then hopefully we will submit approval for Gen 2 sometime next year. So that's the plan. But more importantly, we believe if the next pandemic for whatever virus or new variant from COVID come out, we can move faster than it used to be. Never before would I say that Thailand have 3 or 4 vaccine candidates get into clinical trial. Never before in the history, right? I hope that with this phenomenon, Thai government, big corporate investor, VC in Thailand and maybe in the region, will see